Jesus all the way. I'll forever trust in you. Jesus all the way. JC24/7.
Welcome to another segment on JC24/7. I am excited about the program this morning because we continue our series on finding the right one. And we have invited some additional panelists to help us in our discourse regarding the right one. I want to start with our resident pastor, because put this thing in its right and proper perspective. Is marriage necessary? Does a person have to get married?
You can answer that one of two ways, but I will stick with what the Bible has to say, and I want to just read. And the Lord said, the Lord God said, not Pastor Morris, the Lord God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. So God established from the outset that it is not in his ideal that the man should be alone. He went and he made a helpmeet that is for him. Of course, along with that, God reserves the right to say to an individual, this is the way that I want you to lead your life. So maybe I will have you fulfill my purpose as a single person.
Okay.
So in that case, I would say a person doesn't have to be married, but outside of God making such a declaration, I think marriage is a divine imperative.
Okay. Sister Mona Riley Devines, our resident counselor, should a person be made to feel guilty, therefore, if he or she is not married?
Definitely not.
Okay.
There is beauty in singleness, and as Pastor, mentioned, if God leads you in terms of this is the way I want you to serve me, in terms of being single, then definitely. So one should not be made to feel guilty because he or she is not married by a certain age.
And being single is not a curse. Surely
Definitely not. Sometimes being single is a blessing because you are able to have more time.
I suspect it is.
Of course, singleness is a blessing.
Right.
Marriage is good. Marriage is perfect. Singleness is a blessing. It allows you more time to be able to focus on God, but also focus on you and the things that you want to do as an individual
Because
well.
There are some folk who, I don't know, society seems to put pressure on individuals who are single, especially when you're approaching 30s, particularly for ladies. And, you make them feel guilty. You have to get a husband. What's wrong with you? So, some people might think there's something wrong with them. Is there a case for something being wrong with the person?
All right. We look at it two ways because you don't need a person to complete you. And I say to people, if you go into a relationship looking for somebody to complete you, then you have a problem. You're supposed to go into the relationship as a whole person. 100% on one side and 100% on the other side. Notwithstanding that, there are persons who have subconscious issues. They may have gone through traumatic experiences in the past, either being in a home where you had domestic violence, and so subconsciously they tell themselves, I want to avoid that ever happening to me. And so you hear people, I'm not going to get married because this is what is happening. Or they might have had other trauma that would have affected them and their ability to build and sustain relationships. And when you get to that stage, those persons sometimes can benefit from counseling because it helps you to face what those hidden issues are, bring them to the surface, deal with them, and then allow you to move on after that.
Okay, I want to bring in my youngsters into this conversation. And maybe I could begin by asking Ricky, at what age do you think it's safe for someone to think about dating? At what age?
To think about it, you can start thinking about it from whenever you want. But I don't think it has anything to do with age. I think it has to do with one's maturity.
Okay.
And age does not bring maturity.
Necessarily, that's right. So is there a specific time? If you yourself or your sons or daughters to be were to start dating, what age would you feel comfortable having them date?
I think adulthood, early adulthood.
That's a bit vague. Could you just break it down for us?
19 into 2021.
All right. So anything before that?
Because anything before that, I mean, you may be mature for your age, right? But in terms of entering into a lifelong commitment to another person as well as a lifelong commitment to God.
Okay.
Right? I don't think a 16, 17-year-old is at that stage.
Felice, you agree with him? You do? Okay, so you would never have started before that time. So Pastor Morris, what is your take on that?
Well, I want to go with Ricky to a large extent. The whole thing about it is a question of maturity. And, you know, sometimes people themselves could think that they are ready for relationships because they find themselves being a little bit mature beyond their age. And sometimes people on the outside think you are mature enough. But when you look at the whole question of relationship,
Right.
there is a big word that I will use, but I hope I could break it down. There's something called differentiation, meaning the person is supposed to acquire a certain amount of skills,
Right.
interpersonal skills and that kind of thing, and relationship skills, so that by the time you reach a certain age,
Right.
you are ready for that intrusion of another person. Let's call it that, right? The intrusion or the addition of another person into your life, and you can manage that pretty well.
Right.
You understand?
Okay.
So it comes as though, you know, it's stages that you go, and at every stage you're getting an intrusion. So there's a stage where you reach, somebody comes in to add to your relationship, and then the two of you are growing together, and you're mature enough so that another person comes in. That is when a child is able to come in. There's maturing going on, and that is supposed to take place.
So it's not just about I love you, you love me, she pleased me well, that type of thing.
Well, it shouldn't. You saying it's not just about that. That is you probably describing what ought to be. What happens is people, you say that.
Okay.
You understand that, you know, it's all about that. The Samsonite experience, as I would say.
Okay.
Get her for me because she pleased me well, at regardless of what age that is. And regardless of if they're ready or not, they like the person and they want to get into a relationship. But I think it is something that you and God and those around you have to work out with serious consideration and prayer.
Pastor Riley, I want to make a comment on this because I think maybe in this context, when you look at it, we think of dating as forming a relationship. I just want to look at dating, though, as getting to know other person. I'm not necessarily in a relationship with the person, but this is an opportunity also to identify certain qualities. That's how you get to know people. So where do you take it? Do you take it? And I agree with Ricky in terms of forming a relationship at a later stage, but in terms of what stage do I get to observe people? You can go out in groups. That's a part of it. Group dating, etc. Go out with person because you identify qualities in persons, value system within persons, and so forth that you want to.
And if it's that, you think it's still to be at 19.
No, personally, I think if we look at dating from that perspective, where I'm getting to identify different qualities in different persons and so forth, going out as groups and so, that can start earlier because it's not about forming love relationship. It's not about, say, specialization. It's about getting to know different persons so that when I reach a point and I'm able to say that, listen, this is a person I want to really go steady with, then at least I'm able to identify that, listen, this is a reason why I'm going that way.
I don't think it's just about love and she pleased me well, though.
Right.
Because a wedding is for a day, marriage is for a lifetime.
Wow.
Right. And so love is not going to pay what's off. I mean, and at 16, 17 years old, and if you enter into a marriage relationship at that age, I'm doubting you're going to still be living by your parents in every context of the word, right? I mean, in every context of that. And so love...
And clearly a lot of young people don't see the hereafter.
No.
They see the here and now, I suppose.
That's why love isn't a feeling. I know you have to move on. Love is not a feeling, it's a principle.
Okay. Wow.
So, yeah, because I feel this way doesn't mean it's going to last forever.
No. Sister Riley Devines, finding the right one. We have oftentimes heard this statement. Is there such thing as finding the right one?
That's interesting, and... yes,
you found the right one, by the way?
Of course I did. Most definitely. I most definitely.
Well, you have to say so, you know.
That's why I made an addition to my name, and it's no longer Riley, but it's Riley Devine.
I hear you.
And I hope to keep that until death us do part.
Come on now. I'm sure you do.
You see? And I think what attracted me to my husband in the first place was how he thought, his value system, his mind. That was, and I said that to somebody yesterday, that was what attracted me to him in the first place. How he processed things and how he thought about things. You see, a lot of time people get caught up in terms of the physical, and I look for the right one based on how they physically look. But I don't look. And if you're talking about the right one, you ask yourself a couple of things. How does that person's spirituality line up with mine? Do they have a relationship with God?
Right.
Is it, they may not be on the same level, but are we heading in the same direction? What about their value systems?
Okay.
Simple things like their ambition. What are their goals in life? Are they heading someplace? Because if I'm a progressive person and I want to move ahead in life, and this person decides that, listen, I'm comfortable where I am, I don't want to advance, then you develop conflict as you go along the way.
Okay.
And so there are several facets that you have to look at before you decide. But it's not just about you making the choice. I say to people, ask God to guide you. Because, you know, the Bible says, if you trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not to your own understanding, he will direct you. Oftentimes in relationship, we shut God outside and we say, okay, Lord, you stay there and let me deal with this myself. And then when we get into trouble, we call on him. But we should do the reverse. We should ask him to direct us first.
Felice, Sister Riley Devines, I want to get Sister Felice talk. What's wrong with you? Sister Riley Devines mentioned some things that we should do. What are some of the things we should try to avoid? In selecting, in finding the right person?
We should try to avoid doing it and not consulting God first, as she said, number one. Two, we should try to avoid doing it because people expect that this is the time. Like, you reach 25 and by this time my parents expect me to get married.
Let me become a little more personal. If you're looking for the right man, the right husband to be, what kind of husband would you not look for? What kind of person would you not look for?
Very personal.
One or two things.
That's quite
one or two things. You know, it's a personal thing. You know, this is not theologically correct now.
Well, first and foremost, I would not look for a guy that does not have the same belief system as me. Not necessarily just religion-wise, but just belief system on a whole. So, like, he could share the same faith as me, but we might have different views on how to raise children or how a home should be or, you know, stuff like that.
It's getting very, very stirred up inside of here. I wanted to sort of bring into perspective the whole question of red flags, Sister Mona Riley Devines. I think I want to bring you in on this. Are there some red flags we should be cautioned about?
Oh, yes, most definitely. There are a lot of relationship red flags that we need to look out for. One of the things is person's trouble making a commitment. So sometimes person have previous experiences, prior experiences. So you leave one relationship and come in, and you bring those things, and you're the issue of trust. You are constantly checking on the person, measuring, and you can't make a commitment to the person. So you vacillate in between points. So commitment is one. Jealousy of external interest is another. You have someone, and people might want to check up on everything you're doing in terms of who you're talking to, where you're going. I want to see your phone. I want to see who you're calling to. You need to look out for issues like that. Any sign of violence. Any sign of violence. Because I say to people, what happens during your dating or courtship period, do not expect it to change if you get in a longer term relationship. So if this person is constantly verbally abusing you or even attempts to physically abuse you, then these are some red flags that you really need to keep focused on. Controlling behavior. I want to tell you where you go, what you wear, who you talk to, etc. That trying to mold you into me, apart from allowing, as opposed to allowing you to be the individual that you are. Is the relationship focused just on sex? Is it that the person just wants to get to bed with you or wherever they take you? Is that the sole purpose of the relationship? Because clearly, if that's the sole purpose of getting to know you, when you have achieved that, you're going to move on to the next target. And therefore, that's something that we have to keep in mind. Nonverbal communication is another thing. You get together, and the person is so focused on the iPad or the phone or the internet or the TV, and there's no time for you. So there's no building, there's no bond building, and you need to be aware of these red flags. The last thing I want to mention, do you only have a good time if the person consumes alcohol? Because the bottom line is sometimes people are only able to communicate and relate to each other. Right. Can you do that? Can you have fun together? Can you have humor? If you can't do that, then watch out, because these are things that will set you up for later.
Pastor Morris, what if your child, well, you only have one, should come home and say to you, and you are not pleased with the choice that a child has made. I'm saying a child has made, and but they are convinced that the Lord has brought them together despite the deficiencies, perhaps to better the person's life, and you're not satisfied with that answer. What kind of response? What kind of advice? Let's suppose a parent, not you particularly, but a parent comes to you with that advice. What
glad for that last part.
Right,
not me particularly, yes. Right? The whole thing is, if God is talking, why he's not talking to the parent? Why he's only talking to both of you? Anyway, I'm kidding. The thing about it is, we have to be mindful of these things. Sometimes there are two sides to this. Sometimes parents are able to see things that the child or the children are not able to pick up on. So to just disregard your parents as being old-timers and that kind of thing is a word of caution towards that. But then sometimes again, and I say this cautiously because I don't know if we'll have time to get into it, sometimes we have these ideals, even as parents, and that is how we have been cultured, that when people come in together, they should be ideal. The least conflict that they have and the least differences they have, the better, which is probably not necessarily God's way of thinking. God probably, and it come back to the right one for you might look a certain way, the right one for God might be able to stimulate you in a certain way to bring out the love that God wants to pour in you, that kind of thing. If I've gone too far down, tell me to come back up. But basically that is it. And sometimes the thing that might look ugly to parents is just the thing that God has in mind to mature that person and to bring them into his will more than anything else. So we have to balance it out.
That there are red flags. The person might still be able to swim in the area.
Well, we're not talking red flags. Red flags are specific things. Specific deficiencies, I might add.
That's
the red flags are specific deficiencies. But what we're saying here is that a person could manifest something that parents might think are deficiencies when it's not necessarily that. It is something that God wants to use to bring the relationship closer. And we have to understand that one of the things that we have to appreciate in forming a relationship is the whole question of differences and how God uses that to effect his will.
Have mercy.
May I go to the Bible?
Sure.
Because in Hosea and Gomer's
look where you're going. Look where you're going.
I had to go there, right? Because I believe if Hosea's parents had been around, they would have said, no, run, no way, Jose. But God had a...
No pun intended.
No pun intended. But God had a purpose. And fulfilling God's purpose is what we were put here to do.
Sorry, go ahead, please.
God is our creator, right? And he is our bodies. He's our mechanic. He made us. He knows every part that would make us whole. And so your parents are not your creator. Yes, they physically birthed you, but they're not your creator. So they can't tell you what part would fit in your life. Only God can do that. So that's why it's important.
We'll see.
That's why it's important to seek his will first before making our decision.
And God will not tell your parent something of that importance and not tell you.
Exactly.
That's my firm belief.
Exactly.
Pastor, I want to say...
What if he tells your parent to tell you?
God will tell me that.
I appreciate what the youngsters are saying.
Right.
One of the things I want to remind them, though, don't disregard the views of parents because they have been there. Sometimes young people get very overcome with how people looked and how people behave. Experience shows that, listen, if someone has an interest in you, he or she can do whatever it is that they think will please you. And sometimes it takes a more mature eye to see beyond the surface of what the person is putting through. It's like, okay, you are seeing the hill, but the person is seeing beyond the hill and what comes with it. And so it's very important to listen to the guidance of parents or some mature adult around you and explore things for yourself to see exactly what is it within this person. One of the things, before you go on, I want to say that sometimes the parent might say, I don't want to see you with somebody who's not working. But not working is not an issue. What you need to look at, does the person have the potential to earn? They may not be employed at the moment, but they have the ambition and they have the potential to earn. So that's one of the things that may come up.
I think one of the questions we would have needed to answer, and we don't have the time to do that, is what is the purpose of marriage in the first place? Because that would influence how you go about choosing and why you chose this one. We don't have the time, but we'll have to come back. Both of you have to come back, maybe all four of you. But for the meantime, Pastor Morris, the term unequally yoked, we have oftentimes heard it, and we have heard it bantered about within the confines of our church walls. What do we understand by unequally yoked?
Well,
or what should we understand by it?
The first thing that we should understand that it is not a human construct. The person who came up with the idea of being yoked or being unequally yoked is God himself, right? And what God is saying, is pointing us to, is the fact that, well, generally when we come together, we come together, like we were discussing earlier, in the Samsonite model of things. Get her for me because she pleaseth me well. So I want him, I want her because they satisfy or tickle my fancy. But God has a purpose for bringing two people together. And they have to complete, the two people coming together have to be able to function and bring about that purpose that God has set. So they are yoked equally in light of their ability and the ability through God to bring about the purpose that God has for them. You are unequally yoked when that is not possible, or that is very, very, very challenging, or God is not the one who is doing the yoking and you would have done it yourself. You understand? Because like I say, when he brings people together, it is for the fulfillment of an objective. Right? And in that case, he will bring people who are like-minded. So one of the major things in being unequally yoked is if you are of the same faith, if your belief system are different and varied and wide and far apart, as East is from the West, that kind of thing. You know, and, you know, some people go on to talk about race and to talk about being unequally yoked in terms of economics and that kind of thing. That is not what the Bible is talking about. The Bible is essential, is very, very specific in dealing with that unequally yoked thing based on the faith that you have in the God that you serve and in the way that you serve him. And when people vary on that, there could be a lot of problems. In fact, not even problems. Even if it's working good, God says he doesn't like the mixing. So it's a God thing. He says he doesn't like it.
Let me bring out a part of the discussion that I am sure has caused a lot of issues within homes today. The whole question of interracial marriages. It's not a secret. You, Ricky, is of a specific descent, and it's different from Felice. I'm not trying to insinuate anything, but do you think it's safe for people to get involved in interracial marriages or unions, especially when they may cause disturbances amongst certain sectors of society?
I may be of East Indian descent, but I'm a human being. And so...
Who is of East Indian descent?
Who is of East Indian descent, yes. But you see, I'm hopping on what Pastor Morris said. Man, race really has nothing to do with it, because under the blood as Christians, right? And even if you're a non-Christian listening, once you fall within that same belief system, right? And I'm going to talk as a Christian, because that's the example that I have. Under the blood, there's neither Jew, nor Greek, nor Gentile. It has to do with your belief system. It has nothing to do with your race.
And I take my question from the cue, Pastor Morris said, being of like-minded. People are of the view that East Indians or people of a certain descent think a particular way, and those who are not or of other descent.
That has to do with your culture. But when you come under Christ, you give up your personal culture and adopt Christ's. Because the Bible says when you accept him, you become a new creation. And so you give all of that up.
So finding the right one has nothing to do with race. my question, therefore, as we begin to wind up, how do you know you have found the right one? We have heard the testimony of Sister Myrna Riley Devines.
Pastor, she said that on
national
radio, on TV, you know. So she, as you said, she had to say that. She couldn't say anything else, you know. When this is over, we'll ask her again and see how she answers.
I will answer just the same. I've been answering like this for years.
All right.
I wouldn't want to hear that answer.
Okay, there you go. How do you know? And Pastor Morris, you need to guide these two young people.
Yes, I would love to hear.
I am just interviewing you, sir.
Right.
Right. So how would you go about advising them in finding the right person? How do you know that?
Paul Kinzak, let's say before you start, now you're finished.
No, you're finished.
Right? The thing about it, in the same way you should begin, is the same way you should end. Well, let me call that end. You begin with God doing the selection. And He is going to guide you and give you the knowledge of that part when you would have reached and when you would have satisfied His requirement.
Okay.
I think He's going to reveal that to you as well. There is a certain settling in for the person who is really in tune with God. There's a certain settling into the decision that you would have made to go with this person and to be with this person, even though there are some manifestations of some attitudes, not really red flags I'm necessarily talking about, that may have you a bit uneasy. Right? Because sometimes people feel finding the right one is, you know, all the angels will suddenly appear and they will tell you everything is fine and that kind of, it doesn't work like that. Sometimes there is still some uneasiness, but there is a settling into the decision. There's an uneasiness, but I am comfortable with this. When I'm talking to God about it, I feel that sense of togetherness with Him and that power of agreement.
Somebody has facetiously argued that Adam did not find the right one. He had no choice.
Well,
how do you respond to that?
And that's how you know it was the right one, because he had no choice. You know, he had no choice. She had to be right.
Yeah.
She had to be correct. Is God bringing it? Is God bringing it to him? You know, is God bringing the woman to him? And if we continue to follow that model, it doesn't mean you won't have trouble, because you see what Eve did, even though it's God brought her. You know, it doesn't mean you wouldn't have trouble, but she was still the right one.
But you know, something else that we have to take into consideration, and I agree with Pastor Morris, is that finding the right one is just the beginning of a journey.
Yes.
It's a work relationship. It's what you invest in. Is what you invest is what you get out. It's how you nurture. It's how you build that relationship.
That's right.
And no relationship is perfect, whether the person is right or not right. There's not a perfect relationship. What's important? Can we recognize and appreciate the differences in each other?
Right.
Are we prepared to respect each other? And are we prepared to work together with each other? And that's going to be very, very, very key. Is it that when we have our challenges and our conflicts, as they will arise, they will arise, but can we focus on the issues rather than trying to pull the other down? And are we trying on building each other and taking each other from where you are to another level, so we complement and we raise each other rather than trying to mold you, put you down, or whatever?
You want to say a final?
Very quickly, what was Adam doing when God brought Eve? He was resting. We need to rest in God and understand that His choice will be the best, and trust in Him. Right?
I just wanted to say something
as we close.
One thing that we know for sure, the right one will be imperfect.
Have mercy.
So true.
Will be imperfect.
You could spoil a good thing, can you? But I hear you.
Perfect for you.
Well,
yes,
it's a perfect person, so that there will be struggles, I suppose.
That's right.
What you say. Adam did say, "This is bone of my bone." God didn't say it for him.
Right.
So even though God chose it for him, Adam still had the final say, so to speak. Well, my advice would be for you to look at Proverbs 3. And it was alluded to. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all your quest, acknowledge Him, and you will find the right one. That's my version, but it works for all of us. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you once again on JC24/7. Thank you, panel.